Hi everyone, thanks for joining. And today we're going to do an overview of how to set up mash profiles and recipes in BeerSmith. This will probably be a two-part series, but what I'm going to do is walk through the whole process of actually setting up a recipe that I want to brew and how I would create the mash profile, how I would create the equipment profile, and set all that up in BeerSmith so I can brew a batch of beer. I think it'll help give context so that we can see where those mash profiles come from in BeerSmith and how we can actually design the recipe. So to start with, we'll take a look at what profiles are. And when it comes to profiles, we can have obviously style profiles, but pretty much all the styles are in BeerSmith already. Equipment profiles define what you use on brew day. So do you use a mash tun as a cooler? Do you have a stainless steel mash tun? How big is it? How much dead space do you have underneath the false bottom? So all those things come into the equipment profile and they help with BeerSmith's calculations. There's also the mash profile. That would be what type of mashing do you do? Do you do a single infusion, fly sparge? Do you do a mash out or not? Are you doing batch sparging? You can create your own profile and tailor that the way you prefer to have your mash run. And carbonation profiles and fermentation profiles, though I find that the defaults are pretty good there, so I generally use those. But let's start with equipment. What I'm going to do is go in here and you can see that I've got all of these different profiles that come out of the box. There's a pot and a cooler, stainless steel kegs. You can pick what you'd like. So what I'm going to do is take one of my existing profiles here. I have a 10-gallon orange Rubbermaid cooler that I use for some of my batches. I'm going to copy that. And then using I'm in a Mac, so I'm going to use Command V or Control V to paste it, depending on which platform you're on. And then I'm just going to rename one of these and call this, I'm going to set up a 70-quart rectangular cooler. And this would be one of those Coleman Extreme coolers. I have one of those that I use as well. Okay, so let's open up this profile and now work on it and fine tune it for our equipment. So we have a 70-quart cooler. The brew house efficiency is something that you set now, and you can actually modify it later when you're actually creating a recipe. And I like to keep around 75% for me. If I'm doing a lighter beer, I tend to be more efficient, maybe around 80%. If I'm doing a big high-gravity beer, I tend to be lower, maybe in the high 60s. So you can tune that when you're designing your recipe later. So mash tun volume, what's nice here is I can actually type in 70 quart and it will convert it to gallons for me automatically. I know this is a 17-pound mash tun. That's going to factor into heat loss calculations. And this specific heat here, you use this reference over here. So depending on the material used in your mash tun, you would enter that specific heat there. So plastic is entered as 0.3. When you're looking for your lauter tun dead space, what you want to do is fill up those containers, fill up your mash tun, open the spigot, and let it drain naturally. There'll be water left over. Whatever that leftover water is, measure that out in a container that you can use for measuring, say quarters of a gallon. And I know I have 0.75 gallons left over. Now, working out of the profile over here, what I like to generally do is start off on the fermenter and bottling volumes and kind of work backwards towards how much I need to boil. So I'm doing 10-gallon batches. So in my 26-gallon kettle, I'm generally losing a gallon of wort at the end. And I would rather buy a couple more grains and have more liquid lost at the end of the brew than have to battle trub. I cannot stand that. It drives me crazy. So I get nice clear wort. I don't use top-off water, but my batch volume is going to be about, let's say, 11 gallons, and I will lose a gallon in the fermenter. So that's about a half a gallon per carboy that I'm going to lose. And so ultimately that gets me to 10 gallons bottling. So we'll work through that. Then I work through some of these things about boiling. I'm generally doing a 90-minute boil, and my boil off for a 90-minute rate at 90 minutes, it's going to be about 2¼ gallons. And then I look at checking this, and it will tell me how much, with all those factors, I need to start boiling at. So I need 14.73 gallons, almost 15 gallons at the start of the boil, so that at the end of 90 minutes of boiling, hops and chilling and all that, fermenting, I'll end up with 10 gallons. So this is really makes this easy. Just generally think about it as you're working through this. I like to work from the end result back up here, and you may have to go back and forth and tune things till it looks right. So this is done. Say OK. I've got my demo profile set up there. The other thing I want to set up is my mash profile. And I do a fly sparge, and there's all these different infusion profiles in here. Generally, if you take there's a batch sparge, and there's a, it doesn't say it, but single infusion medium body. What I do, I don't do a mash out. I just don't have room for in my fermenter. I don't have a way of raising temperature too easily. So what I want to do is a single infusion medium body mash out. So again, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it. And I've got 2 of them now. And I'm going to rename this, so it's this one so we can see it, and we'll just call this the demo. And generally what I do is I give it a name that I understand, and I just call it Eric's Fly Sparge. Okay. So again, we'll open this up and we'll tune it up. We'll see what we do. So normally if I'm brewing, my grain is going to be around 72 degrees. Mash tun is there as well. These are things that you can actually fine tune on the day of brewing again. So depending on what your grain is, you can fix that. You can adjust that as you want to. I generally am shooting for about 170, 168, 170 is fine. Grain weight, it's hard to say how much the weight is gonna weigh. I think I generally am doing about, say, 25 pounds of grain. Boiling is 212. My mash pH is, again, that's going to change depending on your beer, but we'll set something here as a default. It's 5.4, looks good. So we can add steps if you want to do a multi-step mash. And if you're doing batch sparge, you can actually say how you do your batch sparging down below. As soon as you start to say batch sparge using, you could say 50%, batch sparge in multiple steps. You could do 33% or 25% or 50%, and you just tell it to use equal batch sizes. But we're going to do a fly sparge, so it's relatively simple. 152 is a good default. We can change that. I know from my Pliny clone that I'm going to set up later, 151 is good, and 60 minutes is what I typically do. So water to grain ratio, isn't it 1.3? So we'll go with that. Okay, so that's how you set up the sparging profile or the mash profile. So those 2 things are good to go. So now that we have that, it's time to create the recipe. I am going to take this article that I have here on Pliny the Elder from Vinicello of Russian River. And this was in Zymergy magazine in, I think it was 2009. So this is just one of the many recipes floating around out there. But this is what I'm going to walk through and add ingredients to create this recipe. So let's go over to my recipes and see how we do that. So you'll see up here there's an add recipe button. We click that, and we're off and running. So I'm just going to call this Eric's Pliny clone. And then we start working through some of those profiles that we just created. So we created that one called the Demo 70-quart rectangular cooler. That's going to be our brew house. The batch size is 11 gallons is what we're going for, 75% efficient. So all those things are automatically put in here for us. Then we work our way down to style. We're going to be doing an Imperial IPA. And this is going to help us understand where the different attributes of this beer should fall as we start to add things. Now we're going to also do our mash profile that we created. This was the Demo Eric's Fly Sparge. And I carbonate in a keg, so we can pick keg, and a 2-stage fermentation because we're doing Pliny. It actually might be 3-stage because we're going to be doing dry hopping too. So, but let's just keep it default. We'll call it 2-stage and leave it at that. And then we'll adjust the temperature of our equipment. This is really important because as we're working through this, it'll help us understand how much we need to heat our strike water to and all that good stuff. So we've got our date, we've got all these good things. Now we just start adding in ingredients. Let's now work our way through the ingredient list. So we need 26.5 pounds of two-row. Pale. Type in pale. I make this look so hard. So we said 26.5 pounds, and we click add. And you'll see our gravity start to creep up here. Then we add 1.2 of crystal 40, crystal 45. So we type in crystal. I have 40, so that's close enough for this. 1.2 pounds of crystal 40. 1.2 pounds of carapils. So I'll say carapils 1.2. Remember, we're doubling everything here because we're just doubling this recipe. And 1.5 pounds of dextrose. That might be under miscellaneous. Let's see. Nope. It must be under grain. So corn sugar. 1.2 pounds. Is that what it was? 1.5. 1.5 pounds of sugar. So you can see now that from a style perspective, we're at 1.075 specific gravity. And the rest of the additions here are hops. So now we can take a look at his gravity target was 1.072. So we're really close. It's probably just a balance of the batch size that I'm using. Maybe if I did bump this up or down, we're really close. So we could adjust the recipe a little bit. We could use the adjust gravity here, and it would, based on our efficiency, it might be the efficiency. Let's see. Yeah, it's somewhere related to the efficiency or our batch size. We're slightly off, but knowing that I have my setup tuned and I have my efficiency right for my system, I could say adjust gravity and then say the desired gravity is actually 72, and it will adjust all of these amounts for me. So now I have 1 pound 7 ounces instead of what I had earlier. So just a way of fine tuning. It's basically changing it by an ounce. So it's not a big deal, but that's how you can fine tune the gravity adjustment. So then we can take a look at adding in the hop additions. So we'll work through this. So we have 7 ounces of Columbus at 90 minutes. So type in 7 here and 90-minute boil. And look at those IBUs. And then we're going to add in 1.5 of Columbus at 45 minutes. Then we're going to add in 2 ounces of Simcoe at 30. And then 2 ounces of Centennial at 0. Okay, so now I'll go back and fix the fact that I didn't enter 2 ounces there. All right. And okay, so we added 2 ounces of Centennial. Now we're up to a whopping 5 ounces of Simcoe at 0 minutes. Good thing is I have a lot of hops left over. 5 ounces at 0. Okay, so now we're into the dry hopping stage. So when we do these, we're going to say, okay, 1 ounce of Columbus. There's 2 rounds of dry hopping. So we're going to do 2 ounces of Columbus. Now we're going to say dry hop, and then there's a number of days. So what we'll do is say, now we're going to add this. We're not going to have the ability in my system of purging the dry hops the way Vinny does. Vinny actually dumps the dry hops out of the conical fermenter and then it adds new. So we're going to let ours sit for the full 2 weeks. So I'm going to say in this case, this is going to be for 14 days. And then 2 ounces of Centennial. Dry hop for 14 days. And then 2 ounces of Simcoe. Dry hop for 14 days. Then we're going to add half an ounce of Columbus, Centennial, and Simcoe again for 5 days each. So Columbus, 1 ounce, dry hop for 5 days. Centennial, 1 ounce, dry hop for 5 days. And Simcoe, 1 ounce, dry hop for 5 days. So our IBUs are 200, and that's, very close. I mean, I know typically I've heard for Pliny the Elder, you're looking at about 90 to 95 actual, and then 200 calculated. SRM of 7 here, we have 6.3 here, ABV of 7.2. So that has to do with attenuation. So that's estimated. Because we have the corn sugar in there, we should be getting pretty low in our final attenuation. So everything else looks good. Now we can just add in, we could add in our other miscellaneous things. This is just good for brew day, so you have them. So I use, what do I use? Werflock. So I'll just say I add 2 Werflock tablets. And then yeast. So generally speaking, we'd use, I'm going to actually in this case use WLP 007, which I'm going to try to make this a little different. I'm not going to go with the American ale. I'm going to try to, I've heard recommendations this is a great dry yeast to use, so this is going to be our experiment. So I'm going to drop in actually just 1 package here, and we're going to, it's important here that you put the date in. So I'm going to put in 2012, and today it happens to be October 5th. So so I'm going to assume I can get this on 10-1, and you'll see the viability should be around 93%. So we're looking pretty good. The color is a little bit low, but overall I think we have a good target here, like a real Pliny clone. So the next thing I can look at is my starter. And I've got I do have a stir plate, and I've got 1 packet in there. The date is really important. I'm shooting for all 10 gallons here to have 542 billion cells. Without a starter, I'd only have 93 billion. So I'm going to use a stir plate, and I'm assuming that I'm going to need 2 stir plates. So I'm going to have probably 2 3.5. That's going to get us pretty close. 3.8. Yeah, around 2 starters, around 3.8 liters in total, will get us to 541 billion cells using a stir plate. And we will crash that down. If I was just going to dump it, I could say add starter to bottling volume, but I don't want to mess it up. So first thing we should do is save this. And then as we work our way across, we can see we've got our mash schedule in here where it's set. It's accommodating for the amount of water that we need. So I'll mash in with 37 quarts of water at 165 degrees to hit my strike temp of 151, and then I'll fly sparge with about 9.25 gallons. When it comes to fermentation, I do the same thing for all my beer. So I'm probably going to actually start more like a 65. I generally don't really follow the fermentation guidelines here. I'm looking to start off low, get it up to about 67, 68, and then let it free rise after a couple days. This is a really important page I use a lot just so I can see how much volume I need in my mash tun. So I have 17.5 gallons. I'm going to need 11.5. So that looks good. So we're in good shape here. And that's how you go through the process. And then the final thing for brew day that you'll want to do is click your brew steps. And this is going to create a nice step-by-step guideline of what you're going to need And what you're going to have to do, and I'm just going to say, let's bump this up, bigger. And here's my brew day steps of exactly what I need. So what I'm going to do, I'll print this out and I'll post this along with the videos and the instructions that we put on the website. So I'll save this out to a PDF file. Call it Eric's Pliny. Okay, so thank you for watching, and I hope you found this informative, and I hope you can use BeerSmith effectively to do some great beers.